I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel, but I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Once upon a time, I had somebody that I cared about. And in this world, that sort of shit's good for one thing. Getting you killed.
After all we've been through. Everything that I've done. It can't be for nothing.
Over the course of my life, I've played hundreds of different video games. Many of them were good, some of them were great, but no game has ever managed to amaze me as much as The Last of Us. And despite completing the story mode 6 times and logging over 100 hours in multiplayer, my interest for the game hasn't dwindled a bit since its release nearly 5 years ago. In fact, my interest and appreciation for the game is actually far greater than it was after my first time playing through. And in this video, I'll be breaking down the reasons why I believe The Last of Us is the single greatest video game ever created. I am aware that this topic has been covered before several times by several people. However, I still feel that I have something new to bring to the table. So without further ado, I present to you my analysis for The Last of Us. Like many, the thing that captivated me most about the game was its rich, heartfelt story of loss, hope, and redemption. And while I loved the story initially, it wasn't until my 3rd or 4th playthrough that I began to fully understand the true beauty of the game's narrative. Unlike other analysis videos, I will not be summarizing the entire plot of The Last of Us, as I assume you already know what happens and you don't need me to waste the next hour of your life repeating it back to you. Instead, I will be breaking down the themes and ideas represented by the story that make The Last of Us what it is. After playing just the first 20 minutes of The Last of Us, it becomes apparent that the game's narrative tone is going to be extremely dark, with Joel's daughter Sarah tragically dying in his arms, leaving Joel with a gaping emotional wound that would only worsen as time went on. His little brother Tommy would eventually abandon him. His presumably romantic interest Tess would be gunned down in a blaze of glory, and his friends Sam and Henry would pass on as well. The same goes for Ellie, who lost her parents at a young age, lost her friend, Riley, her guardian of sorts, Marlene, and of course Sam and Henry. It's no secret that loss is a common theme in The Last of Us, but what captured my attention most was how the characters coped with it. For Joel, the answer was to simply not speak of his past, drinking and sleeping it away. But over the course of the game, he begins to open up to Ellie, as she slowly begins to fill the shoes of Joel's missing half, Sarah. And Joel begins to view Ellie as his daughter more and more as the game goes on, which is of course why Joel chooses to save Ellie instead of the rest of the world in the end. Joel had already lost his daughter once, and he wasn't about to lose her again. And in the game's final moments reminiscent to that of the introduction with Sarah, Joel flees the Firefly Hospital, escaping with Ellie to safety, and returns back to Tommy's dam, finally filling the 20-year void left by the loss of Sarah. But on the contrary, Ellie is left with an emotional void that is never truly filled. She is still upset about losing her friends, Riley, Sam, and Henry, but most of all, she is suspicious of Joel's story about the Fireflies, leaving Ellie in an emotional predicament that is still yet to be solved. The way The Last of Us presents the theme of loss is truly impressive. It makes you think about everything you have, everything you've lost, and leaves a lasting impact on you long after you've completed the game. While playing The Last of Us, it's very easy to see just how terrible things have become. But if you look close enough, you will see that there is still a glimmer of innocence and hope left in the world. This theme is represented throughout the game mainly by Ellie, who despite going through so much, is still a child at heart, finding amusement in the simplest of things.
I'm whistling.
Oh, good. Something else you can drive me crazy with.
What is this?
Oh, this is an ice cream truck.
An ice cream truck?
Yeah, Henry told me about these. They sell ice cream out of the truck.
What? No way. Joel?
That's true. This thing drive around and play real loud, creepy music, and kids would come running out to buy ice cream.
You're totally fucking with me.
Serious.
Man, you lived in a strange time.
It's moments like these that make you forget about all the horrors Joel and Ellie have been through, showing that despite everything that has happened, there is still a sliver of hope left for humanity, and gives you the sense that everything will be alright in the end. There are many examples of this theme throughout the game, but in my opinion, it's best portrayed during the giraffe scene near the end. After going through so much, this tranquil moment is in my opinion one of the most powerful scenes in the entire game, as it shows just how far Joel and Ellie have come, acting as the final threshold between the road Joel and Ellie have traveled and their destination. Everything from the musical score playing in the background to the beautiful spring scenery, and of course the giraffes, resonates a bittersweet feeling that in my opinion simply cannot be matched by any other game. And if you had a keen eye throughout the game, you might have also noticed that there are giraffes littered everywhere along the way, from pictures on walls, stuffed animals in children's rooms, and even a sign for a movie entitled Jurassic Park, acting as a symbol of hope that everything will be alright in the end, and that there's still an innocent side to the world. Many post-apocalyptic novels, films, and video games are set in very dark and gloomy atmospheres in which things such as animals, grass, and trees have nearly all died off completely. Take for example Cormac McCarthy's The Road, or the Metro games. Then on the other hand, there's The Last of Us, which instead shows how nature has enveloped the world that used to be, with mossy vegetation covering cars, buildings, and roadways, pools of swampy green water in place of city streets and hallways, and animals freely roaming about what used to be stores, restaurants, and homes. I think the message that the creators were trying to convey with this is that nature not only has engulfed the planet itself, but also those who inhabit it. The simplest example I can think of to put into perspective is the infected. Once normal people just like you and I that have turned into horrific creatures, all due to an outbreak which started from a cordyceps found in nature. On an even deeper level, nature is also represented through the surviving humans. Take for example Joel, a man who before the outbreak was simply a working class single father trying to provide a good life for his daughter. After the outbreak, he regressed into a ruthless killer who will do whatever it takes to survive, even if that means killing innocent people.
I'll take that as a yes.
Aside from Joel, you can see how nearly everyone has given up their once existent moral and ethical values in pursuit of survival. From notes left behind detailing the accounts of things people had to do in order to survive, to simply the way people talk and interact with those around them.
Next time I'm gonna put a bullet in your head, you hear me? Alright people, this isn't a show. Move it along.
It's the game's depiction of how the apocalypse would cause such a dark shift in humanity that shows just how far we as humans would go to survive, and makes you question how far you would go under the same circumstances. You can't tell a great story without great characters, and The Last of Us is filled with some of gaming's most human and realistic of all time. From grizzled survivors to innocent children, this section of the video will cover the wide variety of characters that breathe life into an incredible storyline. In order to fully understand the relationship between Joel and Ellie, you first have to understand the role Sarah played in The Last of Us. And while she's only in the game for roughly 20 minutes, during that brief time I found myself instantly becoming attached to her character, with the opening scene painting her as a lovable daughter that any parent would be proud to have.
You kept complaining about your broken watch. So I figured, you know. You like it?
Honey, it's
What?
nice, but I think it's stuck. It's not...
What? No. Oh, ha ha.
But as you know, these idyllic moments are short-lived, as Sarah is stripped away from Joel, thus setting forth the events that will unfold over the next 20 years of the game.
Shit.
Joel and Ellie are some of the most codependent characters ever created, which is why I've chosen to analyze them together. As we just covered, Joel's daughter Sarah has been deceased for 20 years now, But when The Last of Us begins, Joel hasn't yet moved past the loss he suffered. And then one day he meets Ellie, a little girl who lost her parents a long time ago. It's at that point that most people were thinking they had it all figured out. She's gonna be the replacement to Sarah, and Joel will finally move on. And while those people are correct, actually watching the bond form between these two characters is worlds more powerful than simply knowing it's going to form. In the beginning, Joel is merely a heartless survivor who really doesn't care about Ellie.
You wanna know the best thing about my job? I don't gotta know why. To be honest with you, I give two shits what you're up to.
Well, great.
Good.
But as time progresses, Joel starts to become more attached to Ellie, and Ellie becomes more attached to Joel, as the pair make their way across post-apocalyptic America. And at the same time, you, the player, find yourself becoming attached to the two characters as well. It's the type of powerful bond formed between you and the characters that, in my opinion, can't be formed through any other medium except video games. Along the way, their relationship is tested several times. But in the end, after all they've been through together, Ellie and Joel simply can't live without each other, with Joel being the closest thing to a father for Ellie, and Ellie being the closest thing to Sarah for Joel. And by the time you reach the final credits for the game, you yourself feel like you can't live without them as well. And while I could go on talking about the relationship between these two characters for much longer, this is simply a brief analysis of their characters. But if you are interested in a full video covering why these two characters are perfect together, please let me know in the comments section below the video, as I would love to put that together. Though her time in the game is brief, Tess serves a vital role in the game's plot, as she convinces Joel to escort Ellie to the Fireflies. And while little is to be learned about her character, it is apparent that much like Joel, she wasn't the best person to ever walk the earth.
Guess what? We're shitty people, Joel. It's been that way for a long time.
No, we are survivors.
This is our chance.
It is over, Tess!
Which represents the theme that survival is simply in our nature, and most of us simply can't stop it from overtaking our moral values in life and death situations. But despite everything she had done, during the final scene with Tess in the Capitol building, I always think to myself that she must have went out happy, knowing she helped propel Joel and Ellie towards the Fireflies, and in her final moments did something for the betterment of humanity. So while she can be viewed as a ruthless survivor, you could also argue that she is a good person deep down. And while she isn't discussed much after her death, she still represents the common theme of loss running throughout the game. In the grand scheme of things, Bill is a very minor character, but during his brief moments he displays many of the game's narrative themes quite well. Upon entering his town, it's apparent that Bill is paranoid of people in the outside world, with traps, barricades, and infected acting as guards roaming the streets.
Jesus!
Whoa, Nelly. What the hell was that?
That would be one of Bill's traps.
Your friend a bit paranoid, maybe?
That's putting it lightly.
This is a great example of how human nature has taken over Bill completely. We also see the theme of loss represented through Bill, as his partner Frank has been dead for some time now. But unlike Joel, Bill chooses to confront his inner demons surrounding his loss, and for him, it seems the answer is to simply play it off as if he doesn't care. By the end of this portion of the game, we finally see Bill shed a bit of that rough exterior and show his true emotions, before quickly reverting back to his old coping mechanism.
Reckon he didn't want to turn, so he...
Yeah, I guess not. Well, fuck him.
It's a riveting moment of the game, as it shows that loss can affect even the biggest and toughest of individuals.
Look, Bill, got your buddy back there. That's a tough deal. And
We square.
we're square.
And get the fuck out of my town.
Aside from Sarah, the deaths of Sam and Henry are, in my opinion, the most heartbreaking of the game. From the moment they come into contact with Joel and Ellie, it's clear they are good people, and it's easy to start to care about them early on. They have similar chemistry of that of Joel and Ellie, and the idea of having them on their side for the rest of the game sounds great. Henry and Joel seem like they could get along, and the same goes for Sam and Ellie. And then, in an instant, that's all flipped upside down.
Oh, okay, easy. This is your fault. This is nobody's fault, Henry.
It's all your fault!
Henry! Henry, no!
It's another perfect example of the theme of loss that is represented all too well throughout The Last of Us, and every time I get to that final cutscene with the pair, I can't help but want to look away, knowing the inevitable outcome. Joel's brother Tommy abandoned him a few years into the outbreak, leaving to join the Fireflies. The pair hadn't spoke to each other since, so in a way you could say that Tommy is a contributor to the theme of loss.
How was it the last time you saw him?
I believe his last words to me were, "I don't ever want to see your goddamn face again."
But at the same time, he is a shining example of hope, as he and Joel eventually reunite after so much time apart in an utterly mad world. And despite having no siblings, I still felt a wave of bittersweetness rush over me when they finally met up, thinking of how I would feel the same if it was my best friend, let alone my own brother. For intensive purposes, I think Tommy was added to the story so that Joel and Ellie had a person and a place to work towards reaching. But his character brings so much more to the table, and the writers did a truly fantastic job in creating his character and developing it along the way to add an extra layer of dimension to an already great cast of characters. Out of every character in The Last of Us, none illustrate how far humanity has fallen than David. From being cannibalistic and willing to kill Ellie, a mere child, David is a perfect example of how self-preservation can overtake moral values under extreme circumstances.
And you think we have a choice? Is that it? You kill to survive. And so do we. We have to take care of our own, by any means necessary.
He's an absolutely terrifying individual who would do anything for his own benefit. In my opinion, David doesn't kill to survive, he kills to thrive. And it's because Ellie was forced to fend for herself, against him, that she would never truly be the same again after the winter portion of the game, making him an instrumental part in the narrative and character development of Ellie. The sole reason for Joel meeting Ellie, Marlene plays a major part in setting up the events that would unfold in The Last of Us. And while many people view her as a villain due to the fact that she wanted to kill Ellie to acquire a vaccine, can you really blame her? As I stated earlier, I would have done the same as Joel if put into the scenario. But I also respect Marlene for having the strength to be willing to sacrifice Ellie for the good of humanity. She clearly cared for her a great deal, as she was a sort of mother figure to her throughout her life. And if I was in her shoes, I don't think I would have the strength to do what she was willing to do.
I get it. But whatever it is you think you're going through right now is nothing to what I have been through. I knew her since she was born. I promised her mother I would look after her.
Then why are you letting this happen?
Because this isn't about me, or even her. There is no other choice here.
And while the aftermath of Marlene's death is still unknown, as Ellie hasn't found out yet, I predict that it's only a matter of time before she figures out Joel's lie in The Last of Us Part 2. It's not uncommon for a story-based title to lack in the gameplay department. However, this is not at all the case with The Last of Us, as it delivers a gritty survival experience that is unlike anything I've played before. From fighting off bandits to surviving hordes of infected, there's never a dull moment to be lived. And in this section of the video, I will be breaking down the aspects of The Last of Us that make it a solid gameplay experience capable of entertaining for hundreds of hours. As someone who has played numerous survival action games, I fully understand why some people enjoy narrowly escaping death time and time again in video games. It gives you an adrenaline rush that no other art form can truly match. The Last of Us excels in this regard, and throughout all my playthroughs of the game, my fear of being mangled to death by a clicker, being devoured by a bloater, or getting hunted down and beaten to death by bandits never fully went away. At the same time, I no longer get the thrill out of other games of this nature. Why, you might ask? For me, the answer lies in how well The Last of Us creates tension, from its music, enemies, and environments. Everything from the way enemies communicate with each other to try to kill you, to how Joel will start to breathe heavy during firefights and Ellie will hide under his arm, or the horrific noises the infected make as they chase after you, and of course the gruesome death animations if you are caught. It's how real the game feels that creates the fear of death in The Last of Us, and it makes staying alive all the more tense. And in a game where you're always surviving by the skin of your teeth, your heart is sure to start racing many times throughout, especially when playing on the harder difficulty settings, where ammo and resources become far more scarce, and enemies get even tougher to deal with, forcing you to stay on your toes at all times, and of course, make every shot count. It's this type of constant pressure to survive that makes cheating death so much fun in The Last of Us, time and time again, and the adrenaline rush of successfully making it through these scenarios alive is in my opinion matched by only a handful of other games. Over the years, we've seen many different styles of gameplay implemented into the action-adventure genre, and while The Last of Us doesn't take the most original approach, it still offers a satisfying gameplay experience that has kept me entertained for many hours at a time. There's nothing incredibly mind-blowing about the core aspects of the game, but rather how perfectly they've been mastered and precisely placed into the game to perfectly fit the tone of the narrative and atmosphere. Let's start with my personal favorite, the melee combat. With its close-up camera angle and fluid animation, taking down enemies up close is as satisfying as it is brutally disturbing. Take for example this scene here. Notice how much of a struggle it is just to defeat that one enemy. And while not every fight in the game is that cinematic, they all add to the sense that Joel will do whatever it takes to survive, and further amplifies the idea that our own self-preservation is ultimately more important than our moral values in a life and death situation. Next, I want to talk about the stealth option given to you by the game. And while you don't have to utilize it, taking the advantage to pass through an area without using any ammunition could save your life down the road when you really need those extra bullets, that life-saving shiv, or that much-needed medkit. It's the feeling of desperation created by the environment's lack of resources that pushes you into these intense stealth sections in which failure can mean certain death. It's the choice to go in guns a-blazing or try to silently take down your enemies that adds an extra layer of tension into the gameplay and makes your decisions even more crucial to your own survival. And when stealth fails, you are sometimes left with an all-out battle on your hands. But unlike other games that feature highly explosive gunfights, The Last of Us takes a much more modest approach to in-game combat. It only takes a few shots to put you down for the count, making each bullet all the more terrifying than the last. To this day, I still get goosebumps when a gunshot whizzes past Joel's head, or when I'm low on health and confronted with a large group of enemies. Take for example this scene in which Joel and Ellie are trying to escape from the Capitol building.
What you got, man? What you got? Let's go! Take a shot now! You got me, okay? Cover me! I'm moving on!
Stairs over there.
Stay low.
The Last of Us takes one of the best approaches to the action-adventure genre I've ever seen. It knows how to build tension, and it makes it explode into fear when the time is right. It's brutal, realistic, and never ceases to keep me on the edge of my seat. With so many terrifying moments of panic and anxiety, it's always nice when the game gives you a second to stop and catch your breath. Sometimes the quietest moments speak the loudest volumes, as they offer you a chance to reflect on everything you've been through while taking in the game's beautiful and serene atmosphere. They also offer Joel and Ellie a chance to talk, and by listening to their conversations, I felt more invested in their characters.
You feel that breeze, huh? I tell you, on a day like this, I just sit on my porch, pick away my six string. You know, once we're done with this whole thing, I'm gonna teach you how to play guitar. Yeah, I reckon you'd really like that.
I dreamt about flying the other night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Go on, tell me about it.
So, I'm on this big plane full of people, and everyone is screaming and yelling because the plane's going down. So I walk to the cockpit, open the door, but there's no pilot. I try to use the controls, but I obviously have no clue how to fly a plane. And right before we crash, I wake up. I've never been on a plane. Isn't that weird?
Well, you know, dreams are weird.
And while these are all good examples of how Joel and Ellie bond over conversation, for me, the most powerful moment of this kind takes place in the triage section during the spring season, and since silence can sometimes speak the most words, I'll just let you guys watch for yourselves.
Hey Joel, I got something for you. Here. Maria showed this to me and I stole it. I hope you don't mind.
That scene never fails to play with my emotions no matter how many times I see it. It's a truly bittersweet moment that reminds you of Joel's past during a time in the game where he's finally beginning to cope with his loss of Sarah, and the photo makes all the memories come flooding back, and as Joel says himself,
Well, no matter how hard you try, I guess you can't escape your past. Thank you.
if you've made it this far in the video, you now know why I believe The Last of Us is the greatest video game ever created. It's because of its bittersweet story, incredibly human characters, and extremely entertaining gameplay that I still have yet to put this game down, and I don't know if I ever will. It brings out some of our most powerful emotions and makes you ponder some of the deepest questions you would otherwise never consider. So while to some, The Last of Us is just a video game, for me, it's a generation-defining masterpiece that is yet to be outmatched by anything else in the entire medium.